All right, can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, well, let's get going. Welcome to week 2 of Design 105 Page Layout Tools. This week we're going to be covering some very useful features that if you take the time to practice them and to get in the habit of using them will save you countless hours in school and in your career. A big time saver. But I'll warn you up front, one that a lot of people tend to want to avoid in the beginning because it seems like more work, where in reality it's actually significantly less work once you get familiar with it and in the right projects. I apologize, my voice is a little bit weak today. Not sure why actually, but just a bit squeaky, so I will do my best. So before we jump into that, I want to go into our class here. And just look at a couple of announcements. The first one is that I did finish all the grading for everything that had been submitted yesterday afternoon. So you can all go in and see your grades now. When you're looking at your grades, make sure and click on the grade itself, and that will take you into where you can see comments. And when you're in there, you want to click on the link that says Show Rubric, because that will show you the comments in the rubric. And the comments in the rubric are where I'm going to put specific comments. So if you lost some points, it's in the rubric where you're going to be able to see what caused those points to be lost. And like I said last week, if you lost points on the assignment and you would like to get those points back, then you are more than welcome to revise your week 1 assignment based upon the comments that are in the rubric, and then resubmit that revised assignment. And I will regrade it next Monday when I do grading again, and you guys will can get any points back that you lost that way. Okay. And also, if you go through the comments and you have questions about anything, definitely let me know what those questions are. You can just shoot me an email or call me. I'll be happy to clarify anything that you need clarifying on. Secondly, I wanted to go over that I've posted our learning coaches schedule for week 2 in the announcements. So Christy's going to be available this week on Wednesday from 12 to 7, and then Thursday from 12 to 5. So if you need any help with anything this week, she's a great resource for that. And then also we'll be doing our multi-session as usual on Thursday from 12:30 p.m. until 2:30 p.m. Mountain Time. All right. Oh, hi, Beth. Thanks for joining us. Oh, no problem. We just barely got started. Okay, so that's really all the announcements I have to go over. I saw some great menu covers. I was really happy with the majority of what I saw. So great job on that, you guys. And if I didn't specifically say and we're going to go over this in more detail when we get to the assignment for this week, but if I didn't specifically say in your feedback which of your menu covers, not movie covers, which of your menu covers to use for week 2, then you can choose whichever you'd like, whichever one you feel like has a stronger design for where you want to go with the inside page. I'll leave that choice up to you. Okay. So what we're going to be doing this week, we are going to talk about the principles of design. And you're going to hear about the principles of design over and over and over again while you're in school and in your career, and for good reason. They are the basis of all of the aspects of graphic design that we've been built upon from there. So we're going to go through those. I've got there's 4 principles of design, and I've got 4 short videos. They're about 2 minutes long or less each that I made a few years ago on each of the principles. So we're going to watch those. Then we're going to talk about style sheets. And style sheets was the thing I was talking about earlier that I said will save you a ton of time if you get in the habit of using them, or at least thinking about whether the project you're working on at this time is one that would benefit from them, which most projects with text are. And then we're going to go through the discussion and the assignment and the assessment for this week, and I'll do some demonstrations as well during that. Okay. So let's start off by talking about the principles of design. Like I said, there's 4 basic principles of design, and those are contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. The acronym you're going to hear most often applied to that is CRAP. So if you'll quite often hear people saying, to remember to think about CRAP, remember your CRAP principles. That's what they're talking about. You'll occasionally may hear it as CARP when you are working with someone that doesn't like saying CRAP. But generally, you're going to hear that referred to as CRAP. And again, that's contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. Now, as we go through these, they're going to seem, more than likely, there's one of them in particular that sometimes people feel a little confused about. For the most part, though, they seem very basic, very simple, and they are. But what you're going to find is that they have layers and layers and layers and layers of utility. So in the beginning, you're going to feel like, oh, okay, I understand what I'm supposed to do, and you're going to be thinking about contrast in a particular way. 15 years from now, if you're an experienced graphic designer, you're going to still every once in a while come up with some new way to utilize contrast in your pieces in order to communicate what you're trying to communicate more effectively, or repetition, or alignment, or proximity. There's so many different elements and aspects of our design that can be paired with these principles in order to communicate things the way that we want to communicate them. They are based upon the way that human beings see things and the way that human beings think. And so they are, these principles are there to help us create pieces that will work in harmony with the way that people think and the way people see in order to effectively communicate what we're trying to communicate. Okay, so let's just jump right in and start talking about our first one. Our first one is contrast, okay? And contrast, what it means in essence is change. A change in size, a change in color, a change in direction, a change in typeface, a change in weight, and more, okay? And the changes, they bring emphasis to things, and they create focal points. They create places that are going to draw our eye, okay? So I've got some examples here on this page. You can see that here we've got an example of contrast in size, right? So we have these 3 smaller squares, and then we have one that's significantly larger. Here we have a contrast in position, where all of these lines are in the exact same position, except for one that is shifted to the right, and therefore creating contrast. Down here, there's a contrast in color, where all the squares are black, except for the one orange one. Here's a contrast in texture, where we have all these basically grid patterns of squares, versus this one here that are lines going across it. Contrast in shape is these circles with the square in the middle, and a contrast in orientation example, we've got one of these squares rotated slightly. Now, if you look at each of these different examples, what you're going to notice is that your eye is automatically drawn to the one that's different. That's the one that you notice. The other ones become background for that different one. They set the stage for the one that's different. And so that's how we as designers can utilize, or one of the ways that we as designers can utilize contrast. If there's something on our page that we want people to notice, there's something on our page that we want to make sure their eye is drawn to right away, we contrast it. If we contrast it, that's just going to happen naturally. The person's eye is going to be drawn directly to it. Okay. So I'm going to put on this video that I made on contrast, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. Okay, so that's some additional information and examples on contrast. So like it said in that video, contrast isn't generally things that are a little bit different. It's something we want that's significantly different. Oh, thanks, Christine. I appreciate it. And we're going to talk about. I want to come back. We're going to talk about the next principle design in a second, and then I want to spend more time talking about that particular idea that things should be significantly different. And so just keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that. But one thing I want to point out right now, a couple of ways that you see contrast very regularly, and we're going to talk about them quite a bit when we're talking about our menus for this week, is that, for example, we generally contrast a title. So, for example, if this was the article title, and down here, I'm going to go to type and insert some placeholder text, is my article text. You're generally going to see this quite a bit larger, for example. It may be bolded. It might not. Sometimes just larger is good enough. Sometimes it's centered, contrasting it in position as well as in size. Sometimes it's colored. But generally, something is done to create contrast with the title and the text. And that tells us that, you know, this is the title, right? And first of all, it's the first place our eye is drawn. We're able to go directly to the title and see what the name of the article is. Secondly, it identifies it as the title, right? So that we can very easily see, you know, what is the article and what is the title. Same thing holds for subheadings or subtitles, which we're going to talk about when we get into doing our well, I'll show you a little example, but with our menu, you'll see even more so. Let's just say that I had something like this, and I were to come here, and let's say that I decide to make that all caps, and I'm going to go with a contrasting font. Let's go with Helvetica Bold and a little bit bigger. And in order to keep this so we have some repetition, which we're going to be talking about next, I'm going to make the title a Helvetica Bold too. So in this situation, this is a subtitle or a subheading, right? The first year. So this article would probably have additional subheadings, something like the second year or you know, the middle times, whatever, you know, section this is talking about. But the purpose of the subtitle is to help to organize it, right? Again, if I'm scanning the article, I can quickly see what parts of the article pertain to what based on those subtitles. I also clearly see that this is a heading for this next section of this article. There's no question in my mind that that was just a sentence in the article that didn't get finished or something like that. I can tell by the contrasting formatting what it is, right? And it helps to organize things and guide me as I move through it. So contrast in text formatting is a very big thing. But then contrast in just imagery work is also very big. And we're going to talk about in well, when you're reading through your feedback, some of you may see feedback from me that said things like the text needs more contrast with the background, right? That's another very big part of contrast in text. We don't want text to be a chore to read. I'm not even just saying that you can or can't read it. I'm saying that it's easy and enjoyable to read, or it's not, you know. And so if I come here, for example, and make this red square my background, and I come here and I'm going to fill some placeholder text in this, and I'm going to select that, and let's go here and make that the red as well, but then I'm going to come here and I'm going to make it a little bit of a lighter red. Okay, so how readable is that, right? I mean, how great would that be to sit and try to read a long paragraph of text in there? Very, very tough. Now, this is a pretty severe example. I've gone with a very, very, you know, similar color, but it doesn't even need to be that similar. Like, for example, if I went with this blue, that's really hard to read too, right? And if let's say that I say my heading, and I make this really big. Okay, it just got easier to read, but is it enjoyable to read? Does it draw attention to itself? No, it's kind of looks a little almost like blurry. It's difficult to read. And we as designers, what we're trying to do, it's not our question isn't can someone read it? Our question is it easy and enjoyable to read, right? So I want to come up with some sort of a color here that's going to be easy and enjoyable to read on that red background. Now that might be a white, for example. Even a black on this, though it's going to be readable, is going to be a situation, oh, actually, that red's lighter than I thought it was. That would work well. Some reds, you get into a situation, let me give you an example, where the red's a bit darker, and yeah, I can read that black just fine, but it doesn't look nearly as good as that, right? I want that contrast. I want that pop. I want that text to just pop off the page and be enjoyable and inviting to read. Okay, so if you see in your feedback something about the text needing more contrast with the background, that's what I'm talking about. Now, one place that can get really tricky is when you're doing text over a photo, because that photo may change where some places are brighter, some places are darker. That text may have great contrast in some places and not so great in others. And in that situation, you have to think of, so how do I manage this? That might be putting a background over that part of the photo so that the text isn't actually on the photo anymore. That might be making your text bigger, chunkier, bolder text so it's filling more space and is easier to see. Occasionally, that's putting a stroke on text. Generally, that's not something you want to do as a general rule, but there's lots of circumstances where it works well. And that's one is if you've got a difficulty with contrast on a photo. Okay. So those are some things to think about with contrast. Whoops, wrong one there. Let me go back over to my slideshow, and I'll show you. So here's some examples of text contrast. And I want to show you that it's not just a matter of different colors, like I was saying before. This first one here, you've got this red and this green. And yeah, that green is definitely a contrasting color with the red, right? They contrast in color and hue is what you'd want to say. However, they're too bright. Exactly, those are bright colors, both of them. That's what, so Lyric was just saying a good thing to consider. We see colors. Some colors will affect people differently. They want their attention, but not give them a headache. Exactly, that's very true. And it's the best thing. This hurts my eyes. This is a perfect example of the color choices that would give you a headache. The reason why is even though they're different colors, they're both bright colors. We need some contrast in the brightness so that it's not so much of an overload on our senses when we're looking at it. So this first choice, that's a bad choice. Even though they're very different colors, they're both bright. They don't contrast that way. Here, you've got two blues. The inner blue is lighter than the outer blue. Again, they're so similar. That's not what you're going to want to choose for good contrast. This third one, you've got two greens. So these do not contrast in hue. These are the same basic hue, that green. But the background is a significantly darker color, significantly darker in brightness. The text itself is significantly brighter, and that makes it contrast in a way that works well. Okay, so a lot of times when we're looking at contrast, we're looking at brightness and darkness rather than just color contrasts. All right. So any questions at all on contrast before we go on to the next one? All right. So our next one is repetition. Okay. And this is repetition represents consistency within a design. We repeat elements so that the design is cohesive, meaning it all works together. The typefaces, the sizes, the colors, the leading, etc., they're used consistently to create visual unity and harmony within a design. So I'm going to put on the video on repetition real quick, and then we'll come back and talk about it a bit more. Okay, so that's repetition. So again, we're repeating things in order to draw our design together as a whole and make it feel like it's all part of one thing, and also to guide people through our design. Okay. So for example, going back to the article example I gave you, I wonder if I can bring it back up here, undo back and far enough. Okay, once I had decided that this formatting, Minion Pro, 12 points, this leading, this is what my body text looks like. This would be what I would do all of my body text. I would not have one paragraph of my body be a different font or be a different size or something like that. And by having that repetition, by having the body text all have the same size, then it becomes very clear what text is the body text. I now know exactly, as I'm scanning the article, it's very easy for me to see what is the body text. Same with these subheadings. All the subheadings would be formatted exactly the same. And that way, that repetition would make it clear to me as the reader exactly where are the subheadings. Now, I say exactly the same, but sometimes you'll see people play with that a little bit. Like, for example, maybe I decide to have the same size, same font, all caps, everything like that, but the subheadings are different colors because my design for my article is very colorful, so they're going to change around from colors. I can do that. Again, I'm making that decision to bend that rule, but I'm maintaining enough repetition that I'm not going to lose my audience's knowledge of where my subheadings are. Okay. So you'll see that very, very strongly held to in text, but not just in text, it's also in the shapes and the right other design. For example, let's say that I had 4 photos. I'm going to do a photo here. Why are you? Oh, I'm wondering why I'm not seeing my X's, and it's because I had it on preview mode. Okay, so let's say I have these 4 photos. Just to make them stand out a little more, I'm going to fill these with a light blue. So in deciding of the placement of these photos, I might choose to do things like make sure that they are all the same height and width, for example. I could do that. Or maybe the ones on the left are the same width and the ones on the bottom are, or sorry, the left are the same width and the ones on the right are the same width, right? So maybe these ones are that wide and these ones are that wide. The other thing is I want to make sure that my spacing between, the side to side for both of these pictures, on the top and the bottom are the same, and the spacing going up and down is the same. Now, they might all 4 be the same. I might have the same spacing side to side and up and down, or I could have the spacing up and down be different than the spacing side to side. That works fine too, as long as the spacing is the same up and down for the ones on the left and the ones on the right. By setting up some repetition that way, you can see how it ties my images together to create a feeling of design, a feeling of that I've got a plan here in the way that I'm laying this out. Rather than if I just had something like this, and that, and that, and that, it doesn't have that same feeling of purpose, right? Now, I'm cheating a little bit because I'm utilizing one of the other principles of design that we haven't talked about yet, and that's alignment. We're going to talk about that again in a second. But this spacing is, the repetition is also a part of this because we're looking at sizes and spacing repeating, right? Exactly. It's creative, not messy. And sometimes we can go, I'm going to show you an example in a minute that there's a lot going on. Doesn't mean it can't be busy, but in fact, the busier your piece is, the more important things like repetition is, because then it keeps it from feeling just ridiculous and instead makes it just feel busy, tied together, but a lot going on, right? So, like one of the things I pointed in that video was that repetition sets the stage for contrast. So we're going to go back to those contrast examples here, and I want you to notice that the only reason that the one that is different stands out is because there's repetition in the other ones. Now, that doesn't mean that contrast doesn't work if there's just two items. It does, but it doesn't, then it's not as clear which is going to be the focal point, right? So, for example, if I come here and I make a square, and then I come over here, and undo that one, and I make a circle, these are clearly contrasting shapes. They do work to create contrast. However, I don't know whether you're going to be drawn to that square first, to that circle first. Kind of just depends on your mood, I guess, or whether you like round rather than angular. I would need to create more squares if I wanted to draw your eye to the circle, and I'd need to create more circles if I'd want to draw your eye to the square. Does that make sense? Now, here's the other thing you remember. One of my very first graphic design teachers told me this, and I've always remembered it, and that is that he said that in graphic design, you want things to be very different or exactly the same. What our enemy in graphic design is similar. Now, that's a generalized statement. There are times when similar works okay, but in general, we want very different or exactly the same. Similar does not create contrast. Similar is not repetition, and it just kind of works against us. So let me give you an example of that. If I come here and I do this circle, and I'm going to just, wrong key. I'm holding down Option while dragging out a few copies of this. And let's go ahead and align these and distribute the spacing, which we'll talk about. So those of you who had me in Illustrator last year or last mod, I'm sure remember this, but we'll talk about it again for InDesign later. So here I have these circles. If I go to this one and I make it like that, that is not different enough to create contrast, right? You might not even notice it. And if you do notice it, there's a chance you'd think there was a mistake, especially if it wasn't centered. Being centered, you might think, oh, they meant to do that. But over here, you might think, oh, whoops, they accidentally made that one too big, right? Or, oh, shoot, they weren't paying attention when they made it and it got a little bit too small. However, if I come here and I do that, it's very clear that there was not an accident, right? I meant for that to be bigger and it contrasts. The same goes with text. If I come here and I say, I am very disappointed in you, okay? Let's go here. Let's change that to a an old style. Okay, so rather straightforward typecasting there, or typesetting there. Let's say I come here to the very though, and I want to emphasize this. Well, ways that I emphasize, I can italicize it, right? What I've done is I've created contrast. By contrasting that, it now stands out. It gives emphasis. I can make it bold or bold italic, right? Again, I'm creating contrast. But this is where I got to be careful. If I come here and I decide that I'm going to create contrast by making this Times New Roman instead of Iowan, well, technically those are different fonts, but not enough so that I'm probably going to notice it. And if I do notice it, I'm probably going to think it was a mistake. However, if you come in here and you use Helvetica, bold, those are very different fonts. And now I know, oh, geez, they really meant to slam down on that very, right? You know, I can even go further, and let's make this red. Now I've got a real emphasis on that very as I read it in my mind, right? So again, whether we're working with text or shapes or anything like that, we want to be thinking in areas of exactly the same to create repetition, or very different to create contrast, right? Yeah, exactly, Eric. We want to use that contrast in order to help to communicate what we're trying to say. Exactly. So here's an example. I told you I was going to show you one of one that shows how you can still create repetition while being playful, right? So this magazine article, it's very clear that this page over here is part of the same article as these two here. Now, this is a totally different color background than this one. So what makes it clear? It's these trapezoidal shapes, right? You've got these parallelograms that have these pictures in them, and that are going off at angles over here and over there. And the repetition of those shapes is creating a theme, is helping us to see that these things go together. Now, within those shapes, they're playing with them. Some of them are thicker, some of them are thinner, so they're different colors. You know, they're not necessarily just sticking to one exact thing. They've chosen the shape itself to be the repetition, right? This is the shape is the repetition, not the direction it's going, not the thickness. They could have had that be the repetition, but that's not what they decided to do. But they've chosen something to very specifically be the repetition, the repeating element, and it's that shape, and it goes all over. Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun to look at, huh? Another good example of creating repetition while still being flexible is these pull quotes, right? So this pull quote here is addressing the needs of individual. The pull quote is a bold text with these thick black lines on the top and bottom. Now, you'll see over here they did smaller pull quotes, and they're a little bit of a smaller size than that. Generally, you'd stick with the same size pull quote. But the space of it made sense for them because they're smaller to go smaller font. But because it's still bold, because it still has those black lines on the top and bottom, it's clearly still pull quotes, right? They're all, these three things are tied together. And on this page, they went with white because it's on a dark background. They needed that contrast for the text. But again, it's got the thick lines on the top and bottom. It's bold. It's the same exact size of this pull quote here. And again, they are still doing repetition in sizes. They've clearly got big pull quotes and small pull quotes, and between the two big ones and the two small ones, they're the same size, right? What do you mean by open-ended? First of all, let's make sure it's actually spelled, it's pull quote. I'm typing there. Like, is it because it's pulled out of the text? That's the idea of it. Is you take a interesting or engaging part of the text and you pull it out and make it bigger to sign up. It totally depends on the design, Lyric. Sometimes it'll be in a box. Sometimes it's got nothing around it at all. Sometimes it has just brackets. It's really up to the designer. But somehow you want to. However you decide to differentiate it from the regular text, you then want to have repetition with all the pull quotes so that it's clear where they are. And look at the text. This is a complicated layout. You've got body text. You've also got obviously a different kind of text here in these thinner columns, and I can tell it's different because it's a smaller font with these yellow subheadings. They're there, they're there, they're here. It's probably little facts or extra information on the article itself, but because they've formatted these differently, they've made the columns thinner, they've made the text smaller, they've given it these yellow subheadings all over here. They're black, so I guess they've given that size of subheading, I should say. I can see that this is something different than this. Now, when you first look at an article like this, that all happens subconsciously. You're not looking at it and going, okay, so where's the body text? You just pick it up and start reading it, right? But that's what I'm talking about, these being based upon the way that humans think. We are the ones that need to be thinking about that. We are the ones that need to be thinking, okay, how am I going to format my body text so it's clear what is body text? How am I going to format these little facts that go along with my articles, so it's clear they're not body text and there's something different. How am I going to format my pull quotes? How am I going to format my subheadings? We're making all those decisions, and we're utilizing these principles of design in order to make it so that the reader doesn't have to think about those things. They just pick it up and read. Does that make sense? And I want you to notice, you know, we've got two more to look at, but in real life, look around you. These principles of design are used everywhere. They're used on signs, like they drive, signs where you're driving. They're used on packaging, software design, right here. So you notice that my menus are, there was the ribbon actually in this one, are contrasted, right? They've got this darker color on this gray background. Well, look, when I hover on one, it gets bold. It contrasts to show me which one I'm hovering on. If I click on one to open it, I get this little line underneath it to make that one and it's bold. So I can very quickly at a glance see which part of the ribbon I'm on because it's contrasting. And these ones are all exactly the same. That repetition, that helps me to see the contrasting one, right? The fonts, the font they've used for all these, exactly the same, repetition. The general thickness of the lines in these images, all the same, repetition, right? And so, all around you, now that you've learned these, well, once we finish the two more, I want you to just kind of be thinking about them and look around you, and you'll see that these are used all the time and everywhere. Contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, the last two we're going to look at. If it's been designed, those principles were used and were thought of. Okay. All right, so any questions on repetition before we go on and look at alignment? Okay. So here is alignment. Alignment is vitally important in graphic design because it allows you to arrange elements in a way that matches how people naturally scan the page. It helps to balance your image so that it's visually appealing, and it creates a visual connection between related elements. So the horizontal alignment is when everything lines up from top to bottom on the sides. So you can see I've got horizontal alignment in this text here on the left. There's also on the right too, at least on the left side. But and then over here, an example of vertical alignment is where things line up side to side, top to going up and down, basically. So here's a quick video on alignment, and we'll come back and talk more about that. Okay, so alignment. Now we've worked with alignment with text where you're just left aligning it or center and right aligning it. The trick then comes to extend that vision of alignment when looking at other elements on your page. So for example, back here, I told you I was cheating a little bit by utilizing alignment when I was doing my different squares. And so here I've got repetition, but I've also got alignment. These are lined up on the left, on the right, on the left, on the right, and on the top and the bottom. That alignment creates a clear grid feeling and says that these things go together. Now, they wouldn't need to be the exact same size in order to make that happen. I could do alignment. So here I'm still creating alignment. I'm creating alignment by doing the left on the sides there, and I've got the left between these two, and I've got the bottom on both sets. Now that leaves this big gap. If I could find a way to play around with it and make it something interesting, maybe I'd want to leave that big gap. Otherwise, maybe I'd want to do something like pull my alignments to the center, right? But no matter how I decide to do it, I need to be thinking about alignment. I need to be thinking about not just how this one aligns with this one, but how does it align with that one? And maybe they don't all align, but everything should have some sort of a draw in with the other elements on the page. So when I say the last thing, let me give you an example of that. Let's say that my design utilized this sort of a thing. Okay, so I've got these 3 squares up there, and then I've got this square that needs to go somewhere down here. Well, this square is aligned with this square, the rectangle, I should say. This rectangle is aligned with this rectangle. That makes these 3 feel like they're connected together. This needs to have some sort of alignment. I don't want to just float it somewhere. And I've got a bunch of options. I could align it like so, and now it's got a connection to these 2 up here on the right. I could do it on the left, but I'm not going to have quite as strong of a connection just because this one over is kind of pulling on it, but that still works. I could align it here with that one. Now those are pulled together. I could align it on the right side of that one. Creates a little balance because we've got 2 here and 2 here. But either way, I want to be thinking of these invisible lines that are pulling things together. And text, let's just say, I'm going to get rid of these. And let's say that I've got a bunch of text here. Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to say my article title. Then I'm going to come down here and insert some placeholder text. Then I'm going to go to, whoops, not the whole thing. I'm going to go to this one here. And I'm going to change it to Helvetica. Make it a bit bigger, and we'll go with a bold. Okay, and then I've got a picture. So what I don't want is my picture. Let me just give this a good size. I don't want my picture to be somewhere like that. It doesn't align with anything. I don't want my picture to just float here. Maybe I have my picture in the aligning with the margin, and it goes across the top of that. Another thing that's very common is what's called a baseline alignment. So the baseline is the invisible line that my text is sitting on. Think of it, if I'd written this on lined paper, there'd be a line going under my text. So I could pull down what's called a guideline. I just pulled down off the ruler to drag this down, and it's just it won't print, it won't export. It's just a little guideline. And then I could line this up with that too. And now my image is aligned with the baseline of the article title. Or maybe I want my image to align with the top of the body text. Pull it down there, and now it's got alignment with the top of the body text. But in some way, I need to be thinking of alignment in order to tie those things together, in order to make them part of a complete design rather than just a bunch of stuff I put on a page. Does that make sense? All right. So some of the common ways you'll see things aligned. You've got edge alignment, where things are aligning on the side and the top or bottom. Center alignment, where you've got this invisible line going down the middle that aligns it. And then misaligned text is where, again, we're creating contrast. We've purposely misaligned something in order to make it stand out, right? Yeah, absolutely, Lyric. You want it to complement, not combat each other, definitely. Now, this last one here is kind of a trickier one, and it's just good to be thinking at the beginning. It's called visual alignment. Sometimes when you click the alignment buttons on your in your program, it's technically aligning something, but our eyes don't see it as aligned. So for example, this left side, the word visual is left aligned with the text below it, but it doesn't look that way to us. It looks like it's a little to the right, and the reason why is because this font, the V, has this giant loop going out to the left, and we don't really see that loop as part of the V. It's just an accent, it's just an ornament. The V is what we're thinking of. So visually aligning, we might cheat that visual word a little bit to the left. I'd actually cheat it a little more to the left than this one, I think, in order to make it feel aligned to us. So again, sometimes we're not just relying on the actual alignment buttons. Sometimes we do that and think, that just doesn't look right, and we end up cheating it a little bit in order to make it look aligned. That's what's called visual alignment. All right. So any questions on alignment before we go on to our last one? All right. Well, our last one then is proximity. Proximity is the one that I see people have it is simple, it's not complicated, but it's the one that I see people kind of struggle the most in the beginning to implement and grasp in certain situations, just so you know. And all it means, it just means that things that go together should be together, right? If things have to do with each other, put them close to each other. And if things don't have to do with each other, put a little space between them. That's really all it means, okay? So this first example of this business card, it's following a lot of the rules of the principles of graphic design. We've got contrast, we've got repetition, we've got alignment, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Like you've got these things spread all around, but this address is all one thing. And these down here are contact information. How do you get a hold of them? So over here, we've utilized proximity, okay, where we have the name of the company, then we've put physically together the address. These are two lines of the address, so they're close together. We've added a little space, and we've put physically together the contact information, right? So the things that go together are physically together. So Lyric, to answer your question, proximity can definitely create harmony, but there's other things that can do that as well. The easiest way to think of proximity is just things that go together should be put together, and that's it. Think, space-wise, get them closer, and things that don't go with each other, spread them out. That's really all there is to it. So I'm going to show you this video here. Yeah, exactly. And we'll come back and talk about proximity a little bit more. Okay, so that's proximity. Now I want to go back to two parts in this video to just talk about them a little more. So like it says here, the relationships are created by grouping the elements, right? So right here, you might not even really, you have to look at it for a second before you'd even notice relationships, right? But if I put them like this, then when you look at this, the first thing that's going to come to your head is shapes. And it's because I'm grouping them by shapes. You're going to be thinking, oh, okay, so this is about circles and triangles and squares and stars, right? That's how I've grouped them. So that's what's important. That's what I should be paying attention to. Where just by switching that, now it's about colors. Oh, okay, we're talking about blue, red, green, and purple. And that's what I should be paying attention to because they're put together, right? By grouping them together in specific ways, we are communicating how people should think about it. We're communicating what people should pay attention to as going together or not going together, okay? And one other one I want to talk about is just clarity, right? So this right here is just bad instructions. No one would have any idea. Probably the best guess would be, well, the color of this blue is first, and that's first, so I must be coloring that one blue. But by moving their proximity just to be close to the one that they're related to, it's very clear what I'm talking about, right? And to do an extreme example, I did this one right here, and that is that these are all the words necessary in order to convey the sentence. But if they're not put together in the right order and close together, we don't notice the relationship at first. We don't notice what we're trying to communicate, right? So, well, first, before we go to that, I want to show you one of the biggest examples of what a situation where I see proximity being overlooked, okay? And that has to do with subheadings, or if we're doing your menu like this week, it would be category headings, right? So let's just say that I've got this article. Let's get a little more text in there. And this article has subheadings. So I'm going to just create a couple of subheadings here. We've got one here. And again, I'll just make it Helvetica and bold. And I'll go ahead and change the color too. We'll go blue on these. And then let's say that down here, I've got another one. Okay, so here I have some subheadings. Let's give it a little bit of space. Okay. Looking at what I have here, who can tell me how I've broken the rule of proximity, the principle of proximity with this? The spacing of the subtitles, exactly. So those subheadings are closer to the text above them than they are to the text below them. But they don't have anything to do with the text above them. They have to do with the text below them, right? So what I would want, at a very minimum, I'd want equal space, and people could just infer. But more than likely, I'd like it to be closer to the text below it than it is to the text above it. Now it's very clear that those go together. It doesn't look weird, right, as you're trying to go through it. You want to make sure that that when you're doing subheadings or category headings, things like that, that you're putting the things closer to what they relate to than to things that don't relate to them, that have already happened before, right? Does that make sense? All right. So here on this menu, we've got examples of all of these. For example, it's very, very easy. Let's say when you go to a restaurant and you want to eat, do you sit down and just start on the first page of the menu and read every single word of the menu until you get to the end and then decide? Now, what's the first thing you generally do? If you're like me, I scan, right? I think most people, exactly, you're scanning it. And whether you've thought about this or not, what you're generally doing is you're scanning the categories, right? I'd sit down, I'd look at this menu, and I'd think hot sandwiches, cold sandwiches, salads, pasta. Oh, pasta. That sounds pretty good, right? So I'm scanning through these headings, trying to find the general food category that I'm interested in. Now, the way that they're allowing me to do that is by making the headings contrast significantly and all of them be the same. So it's very easy for me to just scan my eyes over this page and find the headings. just jump from one right to the next. Okay. Then I'm going to start looking at the items. And again, the item names are contrasting with the item descriptions. And they've done a few things. You'll notice the descriptions are indented a little bit. So we've got a contrast of alignment. The descriptions are a little smaller. They've got, what was I going to say? Oh, there's a small caps on the item name. They're all caps, so that's not that big of a contrast. And then there's contrast and spacing. I've got some space after each menu item and before the next menu item begins. So it's really easy for me to see where the Caesar salad's done and now moving on to the next salad, right? So just again, just scannability. I can jump through these very easily to find the one that's interesting to me. But then all of those different elements, all of the categories are formatted exactly the same. All of the item names formatted exactly the same. All the item descriptions, exactly the same. Prices, exactly the same. If there's a little additional text like add chicken or beef for $2.50, contrasting formatting from the rest of it, but they're all formatted exactly the same as each other, right? I've got nice alignment of all those elements, nice alignment of the prices. Notice I've got alignment of where the categories start on the top. Hot sandwiches, salads, and entrees all have a vertical alignment across the top of it. I'm grouping these things together on different levels. I've got each item grouped with its title in proximity and description, but then I've also got proximity grouping together each category and some good spacing between each category, making it easy to see what's next. Now there's one item on this page that they clearly want everyone to look at. No matter what they're interested in eating, they want to draw everyone's attention to this one item. And so it's contrasted to everything else. Can you guys see what it is? And it's not a menu item. This has been confusing. Just one thing on the page. This is, yeah, exactly. This here that says to add French fries, fruit salad, or cucumber salad and fountain drink to any order for $2.50. This has to do with all of them, right? Any order, no matter what you get, you can do this. And this is going to make the restaurant more money. So they want you to see it. So what have they done? They have formatted this differently than anything else on the page. They've given it this dark background and light text so that your eye will be drawn to it and you'll go read it, no matter what you're looking at on the menu. Okay. So that's an example of how those four principles can work together in order to create a cohesive design that works to communicate the message that you're trying to communicate. So any questions on the principles of design? All right. Well, then what I want to do, we're going to take a 5-minute break today, not as long because we've still got a lot to cover. Let's do just a quick 5-minute break, and when we come back, we are going to look at the rest of the text formatting options in InDesign, and then we're going to talk about paragraph styles and character styles. So I'll see you guys in 5. Okay, we are back. Can you guys hear me again? All right. So before we jump into styles, I want to show you guys the rest of the text formatting controls in the character panel and the paragraph panel, because you'll be using them throughout. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to get a bunch of text here. Now, when you are working with text, over here in the properties panel, you're going to see this section that says character and this section that says paragraph. And again, they're just showing you the most commonly used ones right off the beginning. So last week we talked about these ones here: the font, the font style, the font size, and the kerning, and the leading, and the tracking. And then we talked a little bit about alignment, but just to go over alignment really quick again, we've got left alignment, center alignment, where you've got that line down the middle. Let me go ahead and just select all the text. So I'm not just doing that top paragraph. We got a straight line down the middle and what's called a rag on the left and the right. Right alignment, where you get that straight line on the right and then a rag on the left. These next four are called justified. The only difference between them is what it does with the last line of a paragraph. So this one is justified with the last line on the left. You can see the justified alignment gives you a nice clean line on the left and the right, and then the last line is now tucked to the left. Justified alignment is adjusting the spacing between each word a little bit in order to do that. So sometimes you can get unwanted results, like really big spaces between the words. You want to keep an eye out for that. This one is justified with the last line centered, justified with the last line to the right. This one justifies them all. Last line gets stretched out too, and a lot of times you get weird results with that one. And then this last one is when you're working with a spread, where you've got basically like if you open a magazine, you've got a page on the left and a page on the right, which we're going to do next week. And this one aligns text toward the spread, the spine of the spread, whereas the middle of the spread. And this one aligns text away from the middle of the spread. Okay, so those are the main things in character and paragraph. But if I click on these three dots under character, I get the full character panel, and you can see there's more controls there. If I click on these three dots under paragraph, I get the full paragraph panel, and there's quite a bit more there too. Now, sometimes you're going to be working with this so much, it's better to just go up to Window and type in tables and click on character or paragraph to bring them out as floating panels of their own, right? But you can get to all the settings over here too. So let's talk about the rest of the character panel first. It's generally stuff you don't want to do. Let's put it that way. Mostly, you're just going to deal with this in the character panel. And if you accidentally do this stuff, it can ruin your text. Particularly these first two, vertical scale and horizontal scale. This just literally stretches or squishes your text. So if I come in here and give this a vertical scale of 200, you see it's stretched it tall. And this one is going to do the same thing wide. It doesn't look good. It distorts your text. I've never had a legitimate reason to use it, but in a certain situation where you wanted to distort your text, you might. But again, it's normal text layout. Don't do anything with it. This one is a baseline shift. This basically, I'm going to select one word, and you're going to see that this allows me to raise or lower something off of its baseline. Again, generally you don't want to do that, but if there's a very specific reason why you need something higher or lower than the baseline of everything else, that will do it. And this last one here skews your text. It's almost like fake italics. It's pulling one side one way and the other side the other way. If you're desperate for italics and your font doesn't have italics, you can sometimes use that to a good effect, but generally you just want to use regular italics. Okay. Down here, you've got some handy options. Let's select just a paragraph and zoom in on it. This one is all caps. Pretty straightforward. This one is small caps. Small caps is like all caps, only any letter that's actually capitalized is a little bit bigger. So the lowercase letters are still the size of a lowercase letter, but they are the shape of a capital letter. Okay. This one is called a superscript, and that one is subscript. They're very similar. You've most likely seen those used for the footnotes, right? So if I go to that too, and I come over here, I can click superscript, and it gets small and goes up, shifts its baseline up. Or I can come here and do subscript, and it goes small and just shifts the baseline down. And then the last things in here are underline and strike through, just what you would expect them to be. If I come in here and click that, everything's underlined, everything's strike through. So that's the rest of the character panel. Any questions about the character panel? All right, so now let's look at the paragraph panel. This is stuff you're going to use much more commonly in laying out, you know, the over text than the stuff down in the lower part of the character panel. Obviously, you use this upper level stuff all the time, but the paragraph panel, the stuff in the lower section, you'll actually use quite a bit. These first two, side to side, are an indent. This one on the left is a left indent, one on the right is a right indent. So you'll see if I select that, it's just, I've got my cursor in this paragraph, so it's only affecting that one paragraph right now. If I'd selected the entire text frame, it would do the entire text frame. But it's shifting an indent, you know, it's shifting that away from the left side of the text frame. This one on here is the same, but it's a right indent. Again, putting some space between the right side of the paragraph and the text frame. Set those back to 0 again. Now this next one is a first line indent, and you're going to want to use this instead of the cheat that most people use. The cheat that most people use, and this is a holdover from typewriters, is to press tab when they want a first line indent. Or sometimes you'll do a bunch of spaces. You don't ever want to do either of those. The tab is too big, first of all. You don't usually want a first line indent that big. Secondly, a tab or a space is a character. The programs like InDesign, like Word, the word processing programs, they consider a tab in the space the same way they consider the letter R or a period. It's something you typed. So what that means is if you copy and paste things, then they will go away, right? If I do a tab here and then I copy and paste new text on here, that tab's not going to be there anymore because I pasted over it. But if I change the font of this and copied and pasted something in, it would keep that font. Similarly, down here, any of these formatted things that I change, they're set for this text frame. I can copy and paste new text in here and it'll hold that. And one of those is this first line left indent. So if I select this whole text frame and go over to here and I increase this, you'll see it's going to put a first line indent on every single paragraph. And, you know, let's say I want about 1/4 of an inch, for example. So first of all, it just saved me a bunch of time. Didn't have to go do it on every paragraph. It did it on all of them for me. Secondly, I can adjust, fine tune the spacing to exactly what I need it to be. And third, if I come and copy and paste new text on here now, there's still going to be a first line indent at the beginning of every paragraph. Okay, so that's my first line indent. Any questions so far? All right. This next one's kind of odd. It's to the right of the first line indent. It's a last line indent. It basically means it won't let the last line of a paragraph get to a certain distance of the right side of the text frame. This is another one of those that I've never used before, but that's what it does. It's adjusting things so that your last line never gets too close to the right side. Okay, this is another very useful one. The one on the left and the one on the right work together. They are spaced between paragraphs. This one is the space before, and this one is the space after. Again, this is avoiding a common cheat. People will come here and press return after each paragraph. Generally, you don't want to do that. The reason you don't want to do that, same reasons I just gave you for the first line indent. One, you have to go do it after every one. Two, you don't have a lot of fine-tuning control over the size of it. Three, if you copy and paste something else in there, there goes all your spaces between paragraphs. Where if I come over here and I can say, okay, oh, that's my character panel. and say, okay, I want some space between my paragraphs, and I can increase this, and I can fine tune exactly how much space I want. And it's going between every paragraph. And if I copy and paste text now, it's going to go right where I want it to go. Okay. So now this one, like I said, is before and after. If you've selected all your text, it doesn't matter if you do before or after. They're going to do the same thing. But if you select a specific paragraph, then they do just what they say they do. So if I come here, this one is going to add space before that paragraph. This one is going to add space after that paragraph. And this is a new one. This says the name of it is space between paragraphs using the same style. This is kind of cool. So you can come in here. Let's say we're going to do styles in a second, but let's say I have a body style set for my body text and a subheading style for my subheading text. I can go to my body text and I can adjust this one here, and it'll put spacing between the paragraph for all of my body text paragraphs, but will ignore my subheading text paragraphs. So I can have different spacing for each one of them set that way. Okay. Now, the next one is a very common one you'll see all the time in books and magazines and newspapers. This is drop cap. Drop cap drops down the first line, or actually it can be as many letters as you want, down multiple lines. So for example, I can come in here and say I want that to go down 3 lines, and you can see now I get that look where the R is now large and drops down 3 lines. A lot of times people will cheat that. It looks terrible when you cheat it, but there's just a very easy way to set it in right there. The second one to the right of that controls how many characters are dropping down. Yep, it's awesome. Really easy to use, and a really nice effect to it. That's where we finished most of the commonly used. Underneath that, you've got shading. So this is to basically fill in the text frame with a color. Border is going to put a border on the text frame. This one here we're going to talk about next week, so I'm going to leave that one for now. But the hyphen, it's a good one to know about. Notice how this word dolor has a hyphen, then drops down to rovit. If this is checked, it will automatically insert hyphens where it can to help the spacing. If it's unchecked, it will not allow any hyphens. And that really depends on personal preference or your client. Sometimes some companies just have a style guide that they never do hyphens, and others don't worry about it, right? So you can just turn that on or off depending on whether you want hyphens or not. All right, so one last thing to talk about here before we go in and talk about styles. I told you how this thing on the right is called a rag, where it's uneven. Well, sometimes the rag gets really uneven. Like for example, this C is sticking so far out beyond the top line above it and the line below it. And I'm going to add some space between the paragraphs so I can see better where you pretty much always want space between paragraphs or a first line indent. Because you want those to help you identify where one paragraph ends and another begins. So, okay, here we go. So it's not as bad because it split those off. So let's see if here I don't like how the SD is sticking so far out. So if I come here before that SD and I press return to make it go to the next line, the problem is return is a new paragraph. Now I've got extra space that I don't want. Anything that I've set up to be paragraph settings will be applied because I just told it to make a new paragraph. So what I want to do is what's called a soft return. A soft return says, I want you to move to the next line, but I don't want you to make a new paragraph. We're still part of the same paragraph. To do that, I just hold down Shift while pressing return or enter, and you see that just moves that down. Now that made that one kind of bad, so I'll come up and do the same thing there. Now I've got a little better spacing for that paragraph. So that's a way that you can kind of control your rag, keep it a little more smooth and clean. All right. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Then let's talk about well, actually, sorry, one thing. We're going to talk about paragraph size, I promise. But one thing that I just remembered that I wanted to make sure to talk to you guys about and this was something that was common. I saw quite a bit last week, and so a lot of you'll see this in your feedback. And that is, you guys see this little red plus sign down there? What does that mean? Do you guys know what that means? I can't remember if I told you last week or not. More text, exactly. If you see that red plus sign, it means there's more text than can fit in this text frame. So I need to either make my text frame bigger, or I need to start a new text frame, and we're going to talk about you can combine it or connect the two, or I can make my text smaller, but I got to do something to make it fit. Otherwise, I'm losing some of my text. Now, so keep an eye out for those plus signs, but here's a nice little tip for you. You see how down at the bottom I have this little red light that says 1 error? If I didn't have this, it would be green, and it would say no errors. If I click on the arrow to the right of that, I've got something called a pre-flight panel. The pre-flight panel will tell you exactly what your errors are. Normally, when you go into it, you'll see it collapsed like this. So I can see I have a text error. You know, it could have different kinds. And you click on that. Oh, my error is I've overset text. Click on that. It's this text frame on page 1. If I click that one, it'll take me right to the text frame that has the problem. And if I go ahead and get rid of this text, you'll see that that disappears. And now that is green and says no errors. That's a good thing to look at just to make sure. Now, sometimes you'll see it and you won't be missing any text. Sometimes it's just that you have some extra returns. So right here, it's like, okay, well, I've got this red thing, but it says 1 error. Well, but there's no extra text. It's just because I got extra returns mixed in there. If I come and just get rid of those extra returns, then I can bring my text frame back to the size I want and won't have the error. Okay? All right, let's talk about styles. I've got this one here. Oh, I'm sorry, soft return is a shift return. Just hold down shift while you press return. And just so you know, that works in most programs. You can do that in Word. It'll work just fine. Okay, so here I have 2 paragraphs of text, or two text frames. I'm going to do some formatting with this one. I'm going to change it to be Iowan Old Style. I've already added space between my paragraphs. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. Let's go to an 11 point. I'm going to create some subheadings. And I'm going to make this subheading Helvetica and bold. And I'm going to get rid of the space between the paragraphs for the subheadings. I don't want any. Now here, the problem is I put space above, and so that's putting space between the subheading. So I'm going to go here, and rather than doing space above, I'm just going to say that I want some space for this particular. Oh, I'm doing the drop cap. Sorry about that. Let's, yeah. I'm going to say 0.125 for those. And for my subheading, I'm going to go bigger. Well, I'm going to go all caps, actually. And I'm going to go bigger. And let's give it a color. Okay. I've made a bunch of formatting changes here, right? Now, if I'm working on a large project, any formatting that's going to repeat, I'm going to have to go do all those same changes every single time. I'm going to have to make sure I remember to change the font, to change the leading, to put the space between paragraphs, to let's say that I, instead of left aligning, let's say that I also have it justified. Let's say that I decide I want a little more leading. These are all these changes that I have to remember to make, and if I miss any of them, then it's not going to be formatted right. It's going to look different than the rest of the text. So rather than do that every single time, a very easy way for me to solve that problem is to create what is called a style. Now, there's two different kinds of styles, paragraph styles and character styles. We're going to do paragraph styles first, and I'm going to show you what the difference is. But the way to think of a style is you're saving your formatting. You're basically just saving all the different changes you made in your text formatting so that you can just paste that formatting onto other text and get the exact same results, okay? So you can see that when I'm working with text, I get a text style section up here. I can also, if I want to, go to Window and go to Type and Tables, or sorry, go to Styles and bring out my paragraph styles or my character styles from there. I'm just going to work here in the properties for now, but I'll show you if you ever need to change that. So you can see in my paragraph styles, I've got one style, it's called Basic Paragraph. That is the style that came with, like, it's the default style. That's why whenever I make a new paragraph, it just starts, with certain formatting, a certain size, certain font. That's my basic paragraph style. It's built into InDesign. You'll notice that when I'm over here, my basic paragraph style has this funky little thing over to the side of it. It's because this is no longer the basic paragraph style. I've changed it. If I come over here, you'll see I don't have that because it is the basic paragraph style. So I'm going to go back over to the one I changed, and I'm going to click on this little arrow, and I'm going to, actually, sorry, don't do that. I'm going to click Create Style right here. Now I'm going to name the style I just created. I'm going to call it Body. And you'll see I now have two styles in this list, Basic Paragraph and Body. And it says what Body is. Iowan Old Style, Roman, 11 point, right in there. Now, if I come down to this paragraph, you'll see that Basic Paragraph is still there because I have to apply the body anywhere I want to apply it. It doesn't just automatically go where the style was. I'm going to go to all that, and I'm going to click on Body. Now, all this is formatted as Body. Now, I'm going to select this up here. I can even just click in it. Don't need to select the whole thing. I'm going to make a new style out of that, and I'm going to call this Subheads. Now, I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to type Subheading 2. I'm going to come up here and say that's a subhead. And you'll see that it changed that formatting. Now, here's a problem. I don't like that being so close. So I'm going to go down here to my paragraph styles, and I'm going to add a little bit of space above that subheading. Now I'm going to come up here, and to the right of subheads, that symbol has appeared because this is no longer the subheading style. I changed it. I added space above. This button here means redefine style. What it means is change the subhead style to match where I currently am. So if I click that, now all the subheads have that space above. Can't see it there because of this, but when I make a new one, you will. So over here, I'm going to just type in subhead 1, subhead 2. So now all I need to do is come over here. I'm going to select all this text. I'm going to come here and choose Body. I'm going to go to subhead 1, choose Subheads, go to subhead 2, choose Subheads, and I'm done. So, one, that was way faster than if I'd gone and tried to reformat all that text by hand, right? That saved me a lot of time to have those styles ready to go. Two, I don't need to worry about whether I got anything wrong. I don't need to worry about whether I forgot some of the formatting. It's all done exactly the right way. So all that's formatted the way that I want it now, okay? That in and of itself would be cool enough. But let's look at about a couple of other very, very useful features in styles. Let's say later on I'm playing with this and I'm just like, you know what? I'm not liking the red. What if we go with this dark blue? Oh, yeah, that looks pretty good. And maybe instead of a drop or all caps, maybe I should go to small caps. That's kind of cool. But I want it bigger if I'm going to do small caps. Let's boost it up to 18. Yeah, all right, that looks okay. I don't really like it bold with the small caps, but so let's see what happens if I go regular. Yeah, that's kind of cool. All right, I'm going to use that. I'm going to come up here to my paragraph styles, and I'm going to click to redefine my subheads, and they all change. Once you have applied a style to text, if you change that style, it changes that text. So you change your mind later, you decide you want a different font for your body, you decide you want a different size for your body. All you have to do is change the style, and it puts it everywhere. You don't need to worry about going and doing it. The way I just did it was by redefining it, but check this out. I'm going to go up to Window, and I'm going to go to Styles, and I'm going to open my paragraph styles. Here's my styles I made. I'm going to double click on my body style. Now I want to make sure I don't have anything selected out here, because if I do, it's going to apply the body style, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to double click on it, and it opens it up. This is the whole style. This is everything applied to it. There's so much stuff that it can remember. So let's say that I come up here to my basic character formats, and I'm like, you know what, I'm not digging Iowan. Let's see what happens if I just do the whole thing in Helvetica. But yeah, we'll keep it at 11. I'm going to tighten the leading though a little bit to 12. Keep it, make it nice and tight like that. And I'm not liking the left justified. I'm just going to go to left aligned. Okay. Now, here's an interesting thing. These all changed like I told them to. These ones didn't. That tells me the style wasn't applied to those parts. You see that? So that's something you need to keep an eye out for. If you forget to apply the style to a certain text, you might not notice it because that text might already have that style's formatting, but it won't change if you go change it. That's why it's important to make sure all the text has the styles applied to it. But so you can see how easy it is for me to make changes after the fact and just have that applied everywhere I want. Okay, so that's paragraph styles. Any questions so far on paragraph styles? Okay, so what's the difference between a paragraph style and a character style? Let's say I'm actually going to undo my style change, although I am going to redo. I'm going to make sure these are set to body. Okay, so let's just say that I decide I want a format for emphasizing something. I'm going to say that I want that to be a bold italic, and it's red. Okay, so this is my emphasis formatting. I'm going to select that. I'm going to go to my paragraph styles, and I'm going to create a new style, and I'm going to call it emphasis, and you can already see what it did. It applied my style to the whole paragraph. One of the features of a paragraph style is it applies to the whole paragraph. If I click in here and I come and I say subheading, the whole paragraph gets the subheading style. Okay. So paragraph styles apply to a whole paragraph. They also include a lot of paragraph formatting that character styles don't. Character styles have less formatting options, but they only apply to selected text. So what I would want is to create a character style. They function the same. I'm going to come over here to character styles, make a new one. I'm going to call this emphasis. Now, anytime I want a word emphasized, I can just go to my character styles and choose the emphasis formatting and get that style. Okay? So does that make sense? Any questions about paragraph or character styles? All right. Then I'm going to do a demonstration of using styles in the way that you're going to use them in this week's assignment. Okay. In order to do that, though, first there's a font I want to use for this that ever since I did the clean install, I know I haven't re-added this, so I'm going to go find it real quick. It's one that I've downloaded called Gothic Rounded or Gotham Rounded, one of the two. There we go. Okay, and I'm actually just going to restart InDesign so it definitely registers my new font. And let's create a new document. And I'm just going to do a standard 8.5 by 11 page. And I'm going to make a text frame here. And let's think about some things that would be in the menu. So let's say that first of all, I've got a category for soups. And in that category, I have a French onion soup. So I'm going to type French onion. And I'm going to hit tab here. And I'm going to show you in a minute why I'm hitting tab rather than space. But I'm hitting tab and I'm going to put the price for the French onion soup. And then I'm going to write a description of that. I'm going to say savory and filling, sure to warm you up on a cold day. I'm going to go to my next one, and I'm going to say that I have a chicken noodle. Again, I'm going to hit a tab before doing my price. And I'm going to say homemade noodles and an old family recipe. And then down here, I'm going to say tomato, hit tab again. So that's also $7. I'm going to say rich and creamy, a perfect complement to our grilled cheese sandwich. All right, now I'm going to do a new category. I'm going to say this is salads. And let's just put a Caesar salad. I'll just do one in this one. I just need to have a new category. And I'll do a tab there, and I'll say the Caesar is $7. And I'll say our chef's personal Caesar dressing recipe is the envy of the whole restaurant community. Okay. So here I have this text here. Now, just so you know, it is not uncommon, before I format this, it is not uncommon for a designer in InDesign to lay out their design before they even get the actual text. That's why there's that function for putting placeholder text in here. We'll stick a bunch of placeholder text in there, and we'll create text styles for the certain different types of text we're going to get. Then when we get the real text, you just put it in to the text frames. The styles already apply the styles you need, and you're good and ready to go. In this case, I've got a bunch of unformatted text, right? I haven't done anything to format any of this whatsoever. So now I'm going to start thinking about formatting. I'm going to go, okay, for soups is my categories. So I'm going to want that nice and large. And I'm going to use that new Gotham rounded font that I added. Oh, where'd you go? There we go. Let's go with a bold. And I'm going to go with blue on this one. Oh, wrong place. There we go. Now, maybe I don't want a lot of space after this, because I do want to, considering proximity, I want them kind of close together, but a little extra space because it's so big. Now, I'm going to come over here for my French onion. And I'm going to say for my item names, let's say I still want Gotham rounded, but let's do book on that. And for this one, I'm not going to worry about the price. Oh, yeah, I'm going to show you. I'm going to do something tricky with the price in a second, but for now, let's just set it like that. And I'm going to do this also blue. Actually, now I'm running into a contrast issue. It's such a thin font that it doesn't have enough contrast with that background. So I'm going to change my mind on that and go back to black. But I'm going to show you something here. This is the reason why I put the tab. I'm going to utilize something called tabs and leaders. you guys have seen leaders quite a bit. You probably didn't know their name. Whenever you see a table of contents and you've got a bunch of periods between the name and the number, so if I come down here and I just go period, 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 like this, that's called a leader, okay? Now, the way that people fake doing a leader, and the way you do not want to do a leader, I'm going to come down here and fake one. Let's say that I say article 1, and then I'm just going to do a ton of periods. Let's say it's on page 8, and then article 2, and we'll do a bunch of periods. And that's on page 12. These aren't aligned. The reason they're not aligned is because these aren't the same, article 1 and article 2 aren't the same thickness. So the periods don't end up going in the same place. If I come and get rid of a period, they're not aligned the other way. So that is not how you want to do leaders. You don't want to do periods. It's going to mess up your alignment. So I'm going to show you how you do actual leaders using this French onion one here. I'm just going to just select this text, and I'm going to go up to my type panel, and I'm going to choose my tabs panel. That's going to put my tabs panel right on top of this text frame. Or the reason it did that is because I was in this text frame already. If I just opened this when I hadn't selected a text frame and it wasn't in the right place, all I need to do is select the text frame and then click this little magnet, and it would pop it on top of the text frame. The reason I need it on the text frame is I need this ruler up here. So this ruler is controlling tabs. The way a tab works is it always moves the thing that's being tabbed to the next half-inch mark by default. So you'll notice that this 7 is hitting a half-inch. This 7 is hitting an inch. These two are hitting a half-inch. It's not how much space is between what was before and what is after. It's how much space it is across the ruler. That's why this Caesar and $7 have practically no room at all, where this tomato and $7 has a huge space. It's because tomato went out so far that it can't go to the half-inch line, so it jumps out to the 1-inch line. Does that make sense so far? If it doesn't, don't worry, because they can be confusing. Like with most things when you're doing text, you're adding space between elements, right? If I had a space in the space bar, it's a certain amount of space between the last character and the next character. That's not the case with tab. Tab will always jump out to the next half-inch point on the ruler within that text frame. So if I hit tab again, on this $7, it's going to go out to 1 inch. If I hit tab again, it's going to go out to 1.5. Tab again is going to go out to 2. It'll always go to the next half-inch on the ruler. So if the next half-inch on the ruler isn't very far from the place where you hit the tab, there's not going to be a very big space. If the next half-inch on the ruler is pretty far away from where the last character was, it's going to be a big space. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, like I said, that's the default. With this tabs panel, I can change that. I can say I want the first tab to go to 2 inches. I'm just going to click on the 2-inch point on the ruler there. Then I want it to go to 2.5. Then I want it to go to 4.5. Now watch this. I hit tab. So one tab goes to 2 inches. The next one, 2.5. Next one, 4.5. They don't need to be even. I've set up here in the ruler with these little arrows by clicking above the ruler where I want each tab to go. Okay. If I get rid of this ruler by pulling it away, it's going to jump out to the next one. Now it's doubled up because of the fact that I had that set. But each one of these is a tab marking, and it says where you want the next tab to go. Now in this case, you can also type it in the X. You don't need to click above the ruler. So I'm going to just type, because I want, when I hit tab, I want my text to go all the way out to, let's say, 4.75 inches. So I'm going to type 4.75 in my little X panel there, and that's going to push it all the way out there. Okay, so one tab shoves it all the way out there. Now the reason I'm doing that is I want all of them to do this, so they're all aligned. They're all, every price will be at 4.75 inches. They'll all line up. So now that I've done that, I just applied it to this one line, so I'd have to do it for every one of them. But if I'd selected the whole text frame and done it, they all would have gone. In fact, let me demonstrate that. I'm going to just select the text frame and go type tabs. And I'm going to say I want the first one to be 4.75 inches. Oh, am I not on the text frame? Oh, I'm sorry, I need to select the text. Oh, what are you doing? Because I'll type it and then do that. There we go. It's making me want to click. It's making me click it before I type it. There we go. So now all those are lined up, right? They're all lined up points. One tab takes all of them to the exact same place, which is 4.75 inches. Okay. So the tab panel is a very useful thing for getting that alignment when you need it. In this case, though, I'm going to use styles for that. So I'm not going to do my whole text frame. I'm going to go back and just do it on this first line like I did the first time. And again, it's making me click on it the first time. Didn't used to do that. But so I'm clicking above the ruler, and then I can fine tune it with that. So now I have that where I want it. But there's one more thing I want. I want leaders. I want those little periods. You'll see you have a thing for leader. If I hit a period in there and go away from it, a tab, there's my leader. I could even do a period and a space and make them a little spread out further apart. I could have my leaders be a dash. Doesn't care. Whatever I put in there, that's what my leader is going to be. In this case, let's do leader space space. So I've got dots, but they're a little further apart. Okay, so that's how you create tabs and leaders. Now, you're going to see when we look at our instructions for this week, it says you have to use tabs and leaders in your prices. I'm not going to hold you to that because some designs don't look good with leaders. But what I'm going to say is if you use leaders, if you use like the periods and stuff, you need to do it the right way. It needs to be done with tabs and leaders, not just doing a bunch of periods. But if your design doesn't call for that, if you just want a little space and then the price, that's fine. So one last thing for me to format, though. I'm going to come here, I'm going to format my description. So I'm going to come here and let's do that one, the Iowan old school, old style again. Let's make it a bit smaller. Let's go even smaller still. Let's go to my paragraph panel and let's left align it a bit. And let's add some space before we go to the next one. And one last thing I want to do, I'm going to add some space before the paragraph for my headings so that I get a little, these ones where there's a heading above it, I get a little more space going up as well. So I've got a little space below and a lot of space above for my headings. Okay, so now let's say, all right, this is how I'm going to format my stuff. It's the way I like it. So now I'm going to go to my soups, and I'm going to make a paragraph style, and I'm going to call this one categories. And I'm going to go to this one right here, my item title. I'm going to make it style, and I'm going to call this one item names. And I'm going to go to this one right here, and I'm going to make a style. And I'm going to call this one item description. Ah, there we go. Now I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to make the price italic. Let's go with a light italic, like so. And since I want that to be a style, I have to make a character style because otherwise it'll change the whole line with the French onion. And I'm going to call this one prices. Now that I have that done, finishing the rest of my menu is a matter of going to each item. So this one, again, just because I made the style on it doesn't mean it applied the style on it. So I need to just double check that it did. Okay, good, good, because it's all one line each it did. Oh, this one didn't. So I'm going to call that one item. Oh, I didn't name that one right. I'm going to go to Manage Styles, and I'm going to double click on that one and call it, I don't know why the name didn't stick, Item Names. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to go down the line. This one here is an item name. That is a price. That is a description. That is a name. That is a price. That is a description. This is a category. There is a name. There is a price. There is a description. So again, tons of time saved, right? All I had to do was just format one example of each type of text. Just one example of my category, one example of my names, one example of my descriptions, and one example of my prices in this case because I did them differently. And then make styles of those example ones I did. And then from then, it's just applying those styles throughout, and I get perfect consistency. I get repetition. Each category has exactly the same formatting. And like I said, I can come and change things now. Let's say that I come in here and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to come in here and manage my styles. That just brings up the styles panel, just like if I went to window. And I'm going to actually, rather than manage the styles, I'm going to just do it right here. Let's go to soups and let's see what happens if I make it green. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice. And I can come here and just redefine the category or the style. Now they're all changed. Okay. So creating styles and using styles is a requirement for this week's assignment. So any questions on that, on making those styles and using them the way that I just did? Okay. Then let's jump in and quickly, in the time that we have left, let's look at just details of the discussion, and then the assessment, and then the assignment. So the discussion is about paragraph styles. Now, they use a specific wording for it that can be a little confusing. They call it in here style sheets. Style sheets have multiple meanings. In InDesign, style sheets are these styles that we just made, paragraph styles and character styles. So the discussion is talking about those. If you Google style sheets, you may also find what's called CSS styles. CSS styles are similar, but they're for websites. That's not what we're talking about this week. So you want to when you're doing your research, search specifically for InDesign styles or for paragraph styles or character styles, that sort of thing, okay? But it says for the prompt, in today's discussion, we learn about how the use of style sheets can make layouts consistent to apply to two of the principles of design, repetition and alignment. Do you feel that restricting yourself by using style sheets hinders creativity? Find an example where you feel style sheets were used, but it's still unique and creative. And locate 3 places on that layout that tell us what type of style sheet may have been used, character or paragraph, to support a principle of repetition, alignment, or both. Now, in finding an example, a really easy way to do it, go to Google Images, okay, and search for magazine spread. Magazine spreads will almost always use styles. So you can just find a good example of a magazine spread and you can say, okay, so there would have been a style for pull quotes. That would have been a paragraph style because it's the whole thing. There would have been a body style. There would have been a style for probably the author's name. Now there would have been a style for the headline, for the article title. But there also would have been a character style probably to change because it's 2 different formats in that title. There also would have been styles for down here in the bottom where it has the magazine information. So that's a great way to find examples. Just do an image search for magazine spread. Another good way is search for print ads. Print ads will use styles quite a bit too. Okay? But for this week, you're going to talk about whether you think using styles would hinder your creativity, and then find an example where you feel that they were used, but where it's still unique and creative, and locate 3 different places where they used it, and whether you think it was a character style or a paragraph style that was used. So any questions on the discussion for this week? Pardon Pardon me. Some water down the wrong pipe. Sorry, just one sec. Okay, sorry about that. So, just like last week, the discussion, you need to do your initial post by Wednesday, tomorrow, at 11:59 p.m. And then you need to do your at least 2 follow-up posts by the end of the week, by Saturday at 11:59 p.m. And then make sure you're participating in some way on at least 2 days of the week. All right. So your assessment. The assessment is another quiz, and it talks about different elements, the principles of design. It also talks about elements of design, and it talks about linking text frames. We did not talk about this today, so make sure and watch the pre-recorded session as well as this one before you take the quiz. And next week we're going to use the linking frames more, but just make sure you watch that so you have that information. All right. Lastly, in the assignment, we're going to be finishing our menu. So last week, I'm going to close this down, and I'm going to make a document using the setup that we had last week. Yeah, that's the one. Now, obviously, I don't have two finished menu covers. So to demonstrate something, I'm just going to put a pink fill on this page and a yellow fill on the next page to signify my cover number 1 and cover number 2. So let's say I had this saved as my week 1 assignment. To get ready to do week 2, the first thing you're going to do, you're going to open the week 1 assignment, and you're going to make a copy of it. All you need to do is just go File, Save As, and just rename it so that it signifies that it's week 2. And what that does is it leaves your week 1 assignment the way that it was, and it creates a new document for week 2 that you can work on to go forward. If you look up in my tab, you can see I'm now working on the week 2 one. Okay. So that's the first thing. Get a copy of it. Secondly, determine which one of yours you're going to use. And to complicate it, just so you can see, I'm going to use the second one. Okay, I'm going to use my yellow one. Once you've determined which one you're going to use, go to the Pages panel, which is open over here, and you'll see both of your pages right there. Select the one that you're not using. So I'm not going to use my pink one, page 1, and just come down and click the trash can. It'll ask if you want to delete that page. Yeah, I do. Now I'm left with is the one I'm going to use. Now I need to come down here to this one that looks like a sticky note. That's create a new page, and it'll make a new page. And now it's in the right order. I've got my cover on page 1. And I've got a blank page on page 2, ready to do my inner page of my menu. So any questions on that? All right. So once you've done that, part of the grade is based upon the revisions from the critique from me. So go look at your grade from week 1. Look at any comments I made that you may have lost points for, and make the changes. Because if you turn it in with the same issues that were in week 1, you lose points this week too. So that's step 1. Make revisions to the cover you're using from the critique in your grade book. Once you've done that, you're going to make a layout for the inside page. It needs to include all the text. And again, it's the same assets you downloaded last week, but they're down here below if you need to re-download them. But there's a Word document in there that has the inside text. You're going to need to use all that text. You need to use at least 2 photos. Now, they don't need to use photos we provided. You can go to Pexels and find ones there or somewhere else. But you need to have at least 2 photos on there. You need to have, it says you need to have paragraph style sheets and character style sheets. You don't always need character style sheets. So what I would say is you need to have used one or both of those as they should be used. Okay. Your text, don't just do it to one example. It needs to be applied throughout your menu. So all your body text should have body text applied to it, the body style applied to it. All your categories should have category style applied to it. And make sure you've made a style for any instance of formatting that repeats itself. So those categories. Like, for example, if you just had like, Maxwell's menu at the top and it never repeated that formatting anywhere else, you wouldn't need a style for that because it's only there. But any text that repeats in multiple places, make sure you have a style for it. And just do a paragraph style if it's applying to the entire paragraph or more, and a character style if it just applies to certain like words within the paragraph. Okay. Needs to have custom color swatches, and like I said, they say here you need tabs with leaders. Again, I'm not going to require that, but if you do use leaders in your design, it needs to have been done correctly using the tabs and leaders process that I demonstrated. Make sure that you're paying attention to the principles of design while you lay it out. And then when you're done, you need to export it as a package and zip that package the same way we did last week and submit the zip file of the InDesign package. And that's our week 2 assignment. Any questions at all on the week 2 assignment? Oh, so Beth, yeah, you came in touch with that. If I didn't say which one to use, pick which one you prefer, because you may like one more than the other. If I say specifically this is your stronger one, use that one. If I don't, you can choose. All right. All right. Well, then that is all I had to go over for this week. Any last minute questions before we call it a day? Okay. Remember, I'm going to be available on Thursday from 12:30 to 2:30 Mountain Time in our multi-session. So you can come in and get some one-on-one help if you're struggling with any of these, running into problems. We've also got Christy Paulson, who's available during the times that are in the announcements, and we've got all the other multi-sessions. So definitely come in and get help if you're having any problems with styles or anything like that. They can be a little tricky in the beginning, but once you get them down, they're just incredible. Can you imagine if you're doing a 50-page book, for example, your life is miserable if you don't use styles. And other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Thanks for coming. You too.